Hello and welcome again to another edition of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show, where this week we're super excited to have head football coach at Pinnacle High School, Dana Zupke, on the show. Coach Zupke has been at Pinnacle, and this just does not happen anymore. He's been the head coach at Pinnacle since 2003, just finished up his 22nd year. I was doing my research for the show. I believe 18 or 19 state playoff appearances, including a state runner-up most recently in 2022, several regional titles, and is just one of the first-class guys in the coaching profession. Has won somewhere around 160 games at his time in Pinnacle and 22 seasons, and I believe, and I could be mistaken on this, but I believe prior to Pinnacle, which is a lot of years ago now, was the defensive coordinator for a couple of those state championship teams at Chaparral. I could be incorrect on that. We're going to ask Coach to share with us a little bit about his football story as we kind of dive into some things here. But before we get going, and we're also going to talk some special teams today, which I'm super excited about. But before we talk about any of that stuff, just want to take a moment to remind you that the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show is brought to you by School Funder. School Funder, the only online fundraising company in America that lets you keep all of the money your team raises, minus the small 3% processing fee. We've used them the last 2 years for our Liftathon and kept all of that money. You wouldn't give away 20% of the wins your team earns, so why give away 20% of the proceeds they bring in fundraisers? So please call them, School Funder AZ. They're super, super helpful. Get a hold of them and let them know that the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show sent you, as it'll help the show. While you're doing that, it's absolutely 100% free. The only goal of this program is to grow the coaching profession and maybe share some knowledge for guys. So take a second, if you're watching us on YouTube, to like and subscribe. Helps us reach more coaches and get the opportunity to talk to some more generous people. I think we're, as I've said many times, I think we're really blessed to get to do one of the best jobs out there. And one of the great things about this profession is just how generous everybody is with sharing knowledge and all those things. So take a second, like and subscribe to the show. Coach, before we get going into any scheme specific or practice planning or program building, any of those type of subjects, give me a second here and kind of walk me through your football story.
Okay, it's how far back do you want to go? I'm pretty old.
As much as you can. You don't have to give us a deep dive, but
Okay.
just the whole
Well,
picture.
I'm originally I started playing youth ball in Southern California back in the mid to late '70s, and I went to a now a Trinity League high school, Servite High School, to play my high school ball, where that really that really formed me. Football had always been a big identity for me, and I went to Servite primarily for the football experience. I was a little bit of a troubled youth, and my mom recognized that and sent me off to Catholic school. But the big push was the football side of things, and I had some fantastic coaches that built some discipline. Um, played my college ball at California Lutheran University. Which was part of a defunct Western Football Conference, Division II conference. They're now Division III in the SCIAC, Southern California Intercollegiate Athletic Conference. But fantastic school there. And then I moved out to Arizona in '92, or actually '91, but started coaching in '92 at Marcos Deniza. Um, Coached for a guy named Mike Klupper. Mike was a pretty big name back in the day at ASU, played for Frank Cush. He was the only coach. I shotgun my resume out to about 30 coaches out in the East Valley, and he was the only one that responded. So I cut my teeth at Marcos and worked my way up pretty quick. We weren't very good, and Mike was trying to build the program, so it made for some opportunities. And so by 1995, I was a defensive coordinator at Marcos Deniza. That year, Mike was let go. I actually interviewed. That was my first head coaching interview. It was in the spring of '96 for the Marcos job. I didn't get it. I lost it to Tom Joseph, and I'd never feel bad about that because Tom is a legend in his own right. And I learned a lot because I actually worked with Tom that spring until I got on at Chaparral that same spring, and was hired on to be the offensive and defensive line coach. And then by the end of the summer, Coach Estabrook had hired me. His son was the defensive coordinator and took a college baseball job that summer. And so I quickly jumped the ranks. And so fall of 96, I was the defensive coordinator at Chaparral. We were fortunate to have some really talented players come through there. And in 97, we went undefeated after going, I think, 5-5 in 96. Lost in the semis to Bob Young's Mingus team. They were amazing. And then 98 lost to Sabino, I think, in the quarters. And then we had a great run, 99, 2000, back-to-back state championships, both years undefeated. And then lost to Mike Brown and Greenway in 2001. And then my last year at Chaparral, we won it again in 2002. And then, kind of struck when it was hot. Pinnacle came open that year. I'll never forget, I was actually at church, and a Pinnacle parent that was a friend of mine. And this is the day after the state championship game. He goes, "Hey, Pinnacle's open." And I was so excited. Pinnacle was a new school. We had played them that year. It was kind of the shiny new toy. And, who doesn't want to be at, either open a school or be at a brand new school in a growing area. So I was fortunate to, get the job. And I've been trying to build it ever since, and I say that with all sincerity. No matter what people see on the outside, I always feel like we're a work in progress, and still trying to figure it out after 22 seasons. I don't have all the answers. There's some things that I do believe in. There's a lot of belief systems I have, but I think the thing that's truly carried me has been is I love the game of football, and I love the influence that it has on young men for the better when it's done right. So been blessed with some great talent come through here, and a lot of times it's easy to have that lens of, well, you never won the big one, and I remember being at Chaparral and saying, after that third state title, I said, I cherish these so much because it's so hard at any level to win a championship. And those three teams were so special, and it was so challenging to win those. I remember having that thought, like I say, I may never do that again. And while I hope maybe I can get one before I retire and exit from this spot, I'll be fully content. Just knowing that I've run a clean program, and I've had a lot of influence over a lot of young men for a better portion of 20 years or so.
Absolutely, Coach. Definitely one of the classiest, most respected guys in Arizona. Actually, Coach Estabrook was on my staff in 2013, which was a lot of fun. I learned a lot from him. There were definitely some times that he was maybe I don't know what he definitely had a little of the head coach stuff where I was like, yeah, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, we're not doing that.
He didn't necessarily like that, but I really enjoyed working with him. He was a great guy, and I did a ton of what he told me to do. There was the occasional stuff where I don't know, but there was actually a real funny he wanted to play man against this kid from Desert Edge, and I was like, trying to explain to him the kid we had there. I was like, you want to play man with him on that kid? And he goes, we did the same thing at Chaparral with a kid that wasn't that good. And the story breaks through, and he goes, Kyle Williams. I go, you mean Kyle Williams that played for the 49ers? I was like, yeah, that kid's not on our team, Coach. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
He goes, oh, I guess you're right. He was pretty good. I was like, oh, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, that's certainly not the average kid that most of us are coaching to try to, match that up. But yeah, that's, there were so many great things that I learned from Ron. But I do, there's definitely some opinions, differing opinions when it comes to football. And, I think we all do that. We find the stuff that we like from, the guys that that have had influence over us, and we, borrow and steal, and then we make stuff our own. And, like I said, I learned so much, and a lot of what I learned from Ron was how to manage the business side of coaching, working with the parents and booster clubs and fundraising. We're all in this world where our districts don't have the funds to adequately support us, and without those outside funds and the support from it. And then you just look at your game day support, what you need in terms of running your snack bars and merchandise and all the other things that most coaches aren't thinking about that when they're applying for those head jobs. And it's such a critical piece to it. And he really tuned me into this idea that, you have to look like a professional organization if you want to raise your level and get the kids to start feeling, nowadays it's look good, feel good, play good, right? When I first started, we kind of had the Penn State look, and it was because I just went in with this mindset. I had such an admiration for Mountain View, and I took the job in '03. I said, I'm going to go up to Pinnacle, and we're going to kind of be like the Mountain View of the North, and we're going to have a very simple uniform, and we're going to be very disciplined, and all things that I think were very important. But that's why players that played for me back in the early 2000s, they come back now and they see we got 16 different uniform combinations, and kids are wearing visors and sleeves and, all that stuff. And, and there's a couple of lessons there, but one is, you have to adapt to the world that you're in, and the climate that you're in. But it's also, my kids show up and we got nice facilities, we got, cool uniforms, and that makes you feel like that looks like a successful program, and so, looking like it is part, I think, the role that, especially nowadays, I think that's important. And that was something that I took away from Ron, of how important. And he also knew how important the weight room was. Not a weightlifting guru at all, but he knew that the weight room was critical to the team's success, you know.
I took him to a few team dinners and I was like, I'm gonna get fired, man. He is schmoozing everybody in here.
Oh, yeah, he
Like
can work the room.
they're gonna get rid of me. Nobody. I kind of got my food and go in the corner, and he's over there. He's got a
Yep.
whole all the parent. I was like, wow, man, I got to get better at this. This is impressive.
Well, he's a salesman.
Yeah, got it. Got it. Definitely. Coach, let me ask you, because we talked about this, touched on this a little bit. It's really, when you look around, I actually looked, I've only been at Prescott since 2012. I'm the third longest tenured coach in 4A at their school. Bob Young's obviously coached longer than me, but only been at Bradshaw since 2020. In 6A, I believe you got to be the longest tenured head coach there. You don't? Am I missing somebody?
I am now, as of this year, because it was Richard Taylor.
Okay,
And
yes,
Richard
obviously,
stepping
yes.
down, Coach was at Centennial back when I was at Chaparral. He was the head guy, because we had some great battles with Centennial.
Yes.
Centennial Chaparral is a kind of a little undeclared rivalry from early on, from like '97 moving forward. So I've known Coach Taylor forever. He's a living legend. And with him finally passing it off to his son, that put me in that. I was behind him. I think Dan Hines was the other one at Desert Vista.
Yeah.
We were kind of the old guys of the club, and just it's kind of crazy to think that I'm the longest tenured guy in 6A, but here we are.
It's a tough job. There's a lot going on, but what do you credit that to? 'Cause you just don't see that anymore. You don't see Vern Friedley, Carl Kiefer,
Right.
Gary Venturo, even at Corona, and some of these guys that were at places for so long. What have you been able? What do you attribute that to? Your long-standing place there at Pinnacle, and what are some things maybe you've done to help that?
Yeah, I think it starts with just where where my head's always been is, I think early on I had that fantasy like, I'm gonna kind of establish myself as a high school head coach, and then I'll eventually jump to college. And kind of move where the money is and that deal. And I'll be honest, and it's worse now, but I had this thought 15 years ago. I just, that the influence, that the positive influence you have on kids, not that you can't have influence on young men at that level, but it's so much more of a business. And now today it's all business. It was so unappealing to me. So my ambition was always, I want to be a high school head coach, and I was driven to be a high school head coach. And then, once I got here, it was, okay, now what? And that to be honest, probably about 10 years in, I had a bit of a, uh, crisis of conscience, or whatever you want to say. I started getting that self-imposed pressure, like, well, you haven't won one yet. What are you doing? You haven't won. You haven't won a big game. You haven't won a championship here. What are you doing? And I really kind of rethought my purpose as a head coach. And not that I think every coach, I like to believe every high school coach is in it because they want to have an influence, a positive influence on young men. But I honestly changed my lens, and I think that's what's added to my longevity, is that, the wins are great and we're always chasing, a championship like everybody else, but that's not my focus. My focus is the next group of young men that I have influence. We have 192 kids in the program, and so that's 192 young men that I have an opportunity to have a positive influence on. And that what fills my cup, what kind of keeps my motor running, is when I get that kid that sends me a text and says, "Coach, you're talking that character stuff, and I didn't really like it then. It was kind of lame, but I get it." And they whatever they're going through in their life, they were able to draw back on something maybe that we did intentionally here to influence them. So really, I take that part of my job very seriously, about, forming and influencing young men in a positive way. I think in today's world, it's so critical. And unfortunately, even our high school ranks, and I'm not throwing stones at any programs or any coaches, but I see this more and more, where it's the same influence that we're seeing at the college level. It's like, okay, what's in it for me? I mean, we're dealing with more transfer stuff, we're dealing with more club stuff, and it's about next level. I get so tired of people so fixated on college football. And I'm an ex-college athlete. I'm an ex-college football player. I know, a little bit about that level, but it shouldn't be. And I say it internally in our program. It shouldn't be what we're about as high school coaches, in my opinion. It doesn't mean we don't help our kids get recruited. We 100%. I talk to college coaches every year, but like I want to know the coach out here that's placing, his entire senior class. Like how many teams in the Valley? Even I don't care what program. How many? What's the percentage of your seniors that are moving on to play at the next level? Because I venture to guess we're all probably in the same boat. Some probably more than others. Maybe some of the bigger schools have a little higher percentage. But we're talking out of 30 seniors, I got 6. So what is that? 20% is a good year. Is a really good year of placement. So if my job is all hinged on, college football placement, who am I serving in my program? Am I serving 20% of my program, or I'm serving 100%? And so, and let's face it, I've coached kids like Deuce Robinson. I didn't have to do a thing for Deuce Robinson to move on to the next level. And the reality is, in that vein, in recruiting, with the internet huddle, and it's hard, and honestly, and I'm in a large metro area. We're not getting missed. The colleges see our kids, and there's still this influence of outsiders. Oh no, you've got to do a Heisman campaign on Twitter. You've got to go to the elite exposure camps. You got to go to this 7-on-7 tournament. And that's the side of the game that I don't love. And I don't begrudge anybody who's honestly trying to help a young man move forward in his career. But I've also seen the anxiety that creates when the offers don't come in to the right schools. I've seen that. And so the messaging that I've tried to create for our players is the biggest control that you have in your recruiting is not what camps you go to, not what your Twitter page looks like. It's how you play. It's how you prepare. How hard are you working in the weight room? And that's what's going to set you up to be successful in college anyway. Because let's face it, are you just looking to get offers, or do you really want to be successful at the next level? And if you're doing the right things, if you're working hard in the weight room, if you're working with outside guys, working year round to improve your craft, that's another thing has changed a lot. Where it used to just be a quarterback thing. Most of our kids are looking for outside training, and that stuff's great as long as those trainers truly have the kids' interests at heart. I love that my kids go out and get extra help from outsiders that are experts, that have played at a high level or just trained. Like I don't begrudge that at all. But when the focus becomes, hey, I know a guy at Oregon, and so I'm going to take you up there and we're going to schmooze that coach, and it becomes this, it's all about the networking thing. It makes me cringe because I talk to too many college coaches, and it doesn't, it's very rare that a kid or a dad or somebody changes somebody's stars because they went to this camp or they went with this, I'll call them street agents, and that's what the college guys call them. And it's a part of the game that we deal with it. We're dealing with it now. We're going to deal with it next year, but it's a part that I struggle with greatly because I'm so not about that. And I wish more of us would keep our focus on just our kids and what we can do to influence those kids and make them the best players, and have the greatest high school experience that they can possibly have. And because we know, like, anybody who's played at the next level, I challenge anybody to say, oh, college was so much more fun and enjoyable than that high
I've
school
never heard
experience.
it.
No, it's work. It's a grind. You have to be like, it was a totally different mentality in college than it was in high school. And I think maybe I overplay that sometimes, but I won't indulge in the fantasy of college football. And a lot of what our kids kind of fixate on, and then we get parents and influencers that feed that and enable that fantasy of like, yeah, well, I'm going to walk out of the tunnel at ASU and it's going to be awesome. It's like, you think so? Like, even if you get there, I've got a kid that just busted his tail and finally, as a preferred walk on, Colson Aaron's just got put on full scholarship. Man, he's had to work so hard, and he cares so much, and he's got such a deep love for the sport and for his development that he's worked himself. And he's not an he's undersized for them. He's a 6'4" tight end, which that's another thing that kids just don't want to grasp is like, here's a kid that, I think he's pretty good. He's super talented. He was a multi-sport guy for us here. He's a great baseball player. And man, it took everything for him to earn a scholarship at ASU, because there's so much talent around the country, and it's hard to be at that elite level, and some of it's just beyond your control. And so what do you have control over? You control your attitude, your effort, and being, and I just hate seeing kids so fixated on the next level that they're not enjoying their short time that they get as high school athletes, and I don't know. And so for me, keeping my focus on the kids and on the things that I think are the life lessons that we can teach through the game, that keeps me rolling. I love my kids. I am blessed to have like some great assistant coaches. I've had them over the years, but I just feel like every year I feel like my staff upgrades and it gets better. And I've got some just fantastic assistants with high level college playing and coaching experience. I'm so fortunate. They make my job a lot easier too, because I don't have to work as hard on those sides of the ball, because I entrust to my coordinators. They've got the show running.
Coach, everything you said there, I loved talking about who you're serving. You're serving all your kids there. I find to be just a really valuable lesson for all of us. And what you said there, talking about your staff, leads me really into our next question. What do you think in building a program are the most important hires a head coach can make?
So for me, it starts right. Like I'm a little bit of a weirdo because I'm not real concerned about where you played in college or if you played in college. Um, it really boils down for me for two things. Do you love kids and do you love the game of football? If those things are true, there's probably if we have room for you, then you're going to be all right. I'm a feel guy. I don't have like strong metrics on. I know some guys that like have tryouts kind of with their coaches. Where I mean, I'm not saying that's wrong at all. Like I think there's a million ways to do it. But for me, when I interview a coach, it's heavy conversation. One of my most recent hire, and I just want to get a feel to know this person as a man. Is this the kind of person that fits in? And I think where I think that's valid is I look at our coaching staff and the culture that I have on my staff here, and I believe it's really really strong because I'm surrounded with like-minded individuals. I'm surrounded with guys that genuinely care about developing young men. And through this game, and they love football, and then it really reduces down to they love football and they love kids. I just lost Trace Carroll to. I'm so happy for him. He took over the chaparral program. Just watching Trace, and Trace is a super bright young coach, and it's been really cool to see. But I know Trace cares about kids, and he sees the picture of hey, I have an influence over these young men through this game, and yeah, he has ambition, he wants to win games, but I genuinely know he cares. But his replacement, Sam Keller, who played at ASU and played at Nebraska, Sam reached out actually before Trace got the job, and I just kind of kept it in my pocket. Sam and I just we just sat down and talked. And I didn't ask him a bunch of I know the guy knows something about football. He played at a high level, so that's the least of my concerns. I want to know, is this the kind of guy I want, coaching our quarterbacks? And I'm so fortunate that I trust him, my gut, and Sam is a wonderful man. He's been fantastic, and it's a great example. Just like the guys that I have as my leaders on both sides of the ball. Matt Hanshaw has been with me since 2017, and Matt coached in college at some small colleges and high school. And when I hired him, it was kind of I was short on coaches, and it was right before camp, so it was kind of a take a chance. But he's worked his way up the ranks from JV head coach up to my he's been my OC since 2021. But Matt genuinely cares about things beyond scoring points, and kids aren't a means to an end. Kids matter, and doing things the right way matter. And then Dom Robinson, who's Deuce's dad, is now our defensive coordinator, and one of the just he's brilliant. Like he's like beautiful mind smart when it comes to football. But his lens is so focused on kids and helping our kids be successful and having a positive influence, and he coaches from that. That is his it is always his focus is what's best for our kids. And like I said, that's just some brief examples, but that really describes our staff from top to bottom. And it doesn't mean that you don't want talented guys. I think my guys are very talented, but to me, I'm not going to take a coach just because he's got a good football mind. They've got to really understand our vision and mission, that we're here to build better young men, and that's got to be first. And then we try to keep that at the forefront. And I still believe, and I'll always believe, you do that right, and you have a good process. A lot of winning takes care of itself.
Absolutely, coach. And other thing that you had mentioned, talking about guys that move on to the college game, all our guys that have been successful at the college game, they obviously had a lot of ability, but they loved the game because it's a full-time job, a full-time. They have got your day. I remember Brady Mengarelli, who runs a sports performance place in town now, ended up being a top 10 rusher at South Dakota State. I remember two things when he came back. The first of which he said, Coach, I heard more curse words in spring football, practice one, than I heard from anybody on our staff for 4 years. And I thought that was interesting. He said that. And then the other thing he said is, I love it. You know exactly where you're supposed to be at the exact time you're supposed to be there. And he loved that. There's a lot of guys that sometimes maybe they do want the scholarship. Do they want all the work that goes into it when they get there and they go, I thought I like football. I'm not sure I loved it
Right.
at this level that it's required to be. But moving on. So next question, Coach. I've talked to a lot of guys about this. One of my favorite questions. Longtime listeners of the show probably get tired of me asking this one, but I I could be an assistant, no problem. I don't care if anybody ran the double tight, double wing to the run and shoot. It would make no difference to me. Offense, defense, what they wanted to do scheme wise. I feel like I could be an assistant. The one thing that would be the toughest for me to give up at this point is the practice plan. And the reason for that is I've been on a number, and I've worked for some great guys, great head coaches, but there were some times when it said offensive Indy was 10 minutes and it ended up being 37 minutes. And I was like, I, I'm, I'm coaching the running backs. I got four of them. They're near death at this point. I mean, I don't know another running back drill. Okay, if I'm with the O-line, I can fill this, no problem. But help me out here. But let me ask you a little bit. I've seen some of your stuff. You guys are so organized, especially with such huge numbers. That's another thing. I don't know that I can coach the 6A level now just because there's so many at a program like yours. There's so many kids. It would be. I've watched you guys. For those of you who don't know, these guys come to camp. They do an amazing job. There's kids everywhere, and they're all working, doing stuff the whole time, getting stuff done. So walk me through a little bit of how you go about practice planning, and you've been primarily at bigger schools, but Marcos in the mid '90s was trying to think of where they were at probably not. Obviously not the size of a Pinnacle, but maybe the difference in the practice plan of a 6A school and some smaller schools. So take me through your
Yeah.
practice planning.
So it's interesting, and what a great thing to talk about because you're preaching to the choir. I at my if I was an assistant for somebody, my biggest challenge would be, and I think if I'm interviewing, if I ever step down as a head coach and I go interview for somebody, when you're asked, hey, do you have any questions for me? I'm gonna say, yeah. Can I see your practice plan? That's the thing that's going to be kind of make or break for me because like you said, I just I'm too ingrained in, man, we stay on our schedule, and if we can't get it done in that time, then that's something we've got to talk about in a meeting. But we're not changing. I can't do this, and not I've seen it done a lot of different ways at places I've been. I think Mike Klepper was organized. We had a plan, but back in the early mid '90s, it was basically, it would just say Indy and it would say 20-25 minutes or whatever, but no detail in what we were doing. Working with Ron at Chaparral, Ron was very organized. Ron had a template that we used. But we would stray, especially as an offensive guy. So team tended to go a little bit longer, and Ron didn't script plays, and that was another one that now I know, like I couldn't get through a practice with somebody not scripting their both sides of the ball. We script everything. So when I got to Pinnacle, I already had, I was basically taking the stuff that I learned from Ron in terms of planning and practice organization. And I was always big on like, hey, if our practice is supposed to be 2 hours, 2.5 hours, we're gonna keep it to that. We may run over here or there, but I was pretty good about sticking to a script. But we were blessed for years to be a Fiesta Bowl practice site. And I'll never forget watching this. This really was a big influence. Is watching Ohio State practice. Coach Tressel was there. He's fantastic. Like so gracious and humble. And I think he was part of that old school of college coaches that were more like we are as high school coaches. They really still felt like they were influencing young men. And I'm not trying to disrespect any current college coaches, but I just like Coach Tressel was. It was just amazing watching them practice. Well, they were the first. Going to that practice, watching them. They used our scoreboard timer and used the practice timer, the segment timer on our scoreboard, and said, I didn't even know our scoreboard could do that. I just thought they had some fancy stuff they brought in. And then I found out through, I think, one of my assistants, oh yeah, we can do that. And so I started going to the 5 minute, segments. Even if we have a 20-minute indie period, we still have 5 minute segments, because in that indie period, it might be, hey, 5 minutes, we might be doing a little combo drill with, maybe the tight ends are there, whatever. So, it starts with those time segments, and those times are pretty sacred for us. I'm real big on transition. Again, that college level influence where, we need to be moving in practice. We're not going to sit around. I'm not going to meet at the 50 and say, okay, guys, what are we doing next? We go into practice, and that full practice is scripted from start to finish. And even there, the level of detail has increased even in recent years, where we're doing a lot more situational scripts, and maybe even shorter periods. We started that a little bit this spring, where I think all of our team periods were 10 minutes or less. And some of it is, I think, just dealing with the natural kind of, I hope I don't get in trouble for saying, but like kind of the natural ADD that all of our kids have, um, you know, bouncing around and getting in and getting out with certain drills. And it also speaks to something we talked about before we started. We're always trying to make sure we're staying healthy. And so we've done this, having a marathon 25, 30-minute team period. I think you start losing focus, you start getting fatigue, and that's usually when, and you really have to start asking yourself, how productive was that period? Yeah, we did our team period for 30 minutes, but what did we really accomplish? We're getting more and more into, okay, we're doing a 5 minute red zone period. We're doing a 5 minute, third and long period, or a third down script, or a third down competitive period. Things like that, where it's, man, we're going 5-10 minutes, getting a tight script. And then some of the challenge becomes, how much can we put in those 5 minutes? And I think here's another one I think a lot of coaches struggle with. It's we film every practice. If anybody's out there doesn't have a drone, I would highly recommend you get a drone and somebody that can fly it. It's the best film on earth as far as practice film, and we coach almost entirely off of film. And so we're going to run through that script, and I've been a part of that, where you run the play, and I'm not saying this is wrong, but I've been a part of that. It's like, nope, we didn't execute that play right. Line it up, run it again, right? It's like Rudy. You hear Dan Devine up in the tower, run it again. and that's not wrong. And it's not that we never rerun a play, but we're gonna correct the errors just like we do on Saturday, and we're gonna use that practice film as teach tape. Now, if a kid is just blowing an assignment, that position coach can absolutely take that kid out, put somebody else in, and coach them up real quick. But we're going to move we just don't have time. We don't have time to stop. And I think that's what happens to those programs or those places that have, a team period that starts out as 20 minutes and ends up being 35, is because, hey, you're having a bad day, and guys aren't running it right. What we would do is we're going to run through that script, and we're going to make notes and say, hey, we need to address this tomorrow in practice, and we if we have to build extra time into practice because it's that bad, then we will. But more often than not, we can make those corrections on film, the next day in meetings, and then move on to the next practice. But to me, it's like, with a large school too, we're platoon. And, so it's a lot more like a college level. So, daily, we typically have inside run period. We have, a skelly, like a pass skelly 7-on-7 period, and then multiple team periods. The other thing that's been big for us is competitive periods. And this is the biggest challenge. And everybody probably does this a little bit different, but this is a numbers thing. When we do our typical team periods, we're going against a true scout. Since we practice JV and varsity together, our JV tends to be our scout. With some varsity backups would jump in that situation, and then we sometimes don't feel like we're just getting that look, that game look, and it's just not the quality. But you need to line, you need to get reps, and you need to have a scout team do that. But so we try to find that balance, but we also feel like we need best on best time. Those are usually 5-minute periods for us, and it's a specific situation. So some days it's just first downs, and it's just a first down, and we'll be competitive, and we decide who won. If the offense gets more than 3 yards on a run on first down, then they win that first down, that rep. But we'll come back and reset 1st and 10s. Or we'll do, third down's another big situational one. We'll do third and short. We'll literally go a script of third and short, medium and long, and cycle through that. And we just decide who wins reps. If it's 3rd and 3 and the offense gets 2 yards, defense wins that rep. So our kids love that because they want to compete. They absolutely, they live for that. We get the best performance out of them during those competitive periods. But it also comes with the greatest risk, right? Those are our best guys going against our best guys. So it tends to be the greatest risk of injury. So we try to get in and get out on those competitive periods. But that's been another piece. And we'll usually try to have 2 of those interspersed in a practice, in a single practice. So maybe one in the first 30 minutes. Sometimes we'll do it out of the gate. And that's hard sometimes in the fall when it's really hot, but there's nothing to get your practice tempo and your intensity up than starting with a competitive period. So that's another thing we'll think about. So we'll finish our, team agilities, and instead of even going to Indy, it's like, we're going to go red zone competitive right now. And boom, we got 5 minutes, and man, we're getting after it. And now, both sides, offense and defense, our juices are flowing, and then pow, we're going right into Indy. And that can be a really good way to kind of ignite the tempo and the energy for a practice, is to start with the competitive period. But like I said, it's challenging sometimes in the heat early on. Our district forces us to practice at night, so it's not like we're going after school anyway. But it's still at 6 p.m. It's still blazing in the fall, so that's challenging sometimes. But and it's just like I said, details are big. Scripting out, even on our practice plans. Those 5-minute segments are most of our coaches have. Hey, 5 minutes. We're doing box leverage drill. We're doing combo drill. We're doing, there's a 5 minutes. And I think that's good for those coaches to not, get off. It's easy to, spend all your time on one thing and, I meant to do these three things. But if you constantly see it on your practice, these are the objectives I have today for my drills. And the other thing it does, I think, is it forces our coaches, and I demand of our coaches, to be efficient. Like if that drill's not showing up on film, so we have coach. I didn't come up with this term, but I love it. Is like we'll call coaches out if they do Instagram drills. If they do drills with like 14,000 cones and 37 bags and not that bags and cones are bad, they have their place. But if it's just something like, okay, explain to me how that's going to show up on the film. What's the objective for your kids right there? And unfortunately, some coaches, they do what they find the drill on Instagram, they do it, or they did the drill that their coach did. Well, that doesn't mean it was a good drill. Like sometimes it's my big one right now is D-line. Is I watch sometimes and again I think they're Instagram drills where we're just spending all of our time on pass rush moves. And it's like, that's great and all. But I heard Roy Lopez, and I love Roy. And Roy's, son was playing for the Cardinals. I think it was last year we had the AZFCA clinic, and Roy was just talking. It was so refreshing to hear Roy talk about his son, what his son who started for the Cardinals, what he focuses on, and it's get off, punch, pad level. It's wow, like fundamentals, like that's the stuff that's going to make or break you, not whether you can do a Aaron Donald, spin move or something, with all this flashy stuff that how often are you using that in the games and how effective is that stuff? So that, like, if we ever see that, and I don't get that a whole lot, but if I ever see that, talk to the coordinator, say, hey, man, you got to go talk to the guy about, what he's doing. So, but most of our coaches do a really good job of, okay, my kids aren't, maybe our leverage was really bad in our last game. So, man, we are going to work leverage to death, for the next, 3 practices. And, hey, can I come up with a drill or do I find a drill online that addresses that leverage problem that we had? That's the way that I ask our coaches to approach practice and how they drill. So we're not just like everything we do should have a purpose. Even conditioning, which I'm not a big believer in just mindless conditioning, but to me, the practice should be your conditioning. If you're going hard for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, the close you can to simulate, because none of us can simulate game conditions, right? We can't simulate what it's like to actually play 60 to 80 snaps in a game. But if you go hard for, 2.5 hours, that's is 10 minutes of, gassers at the end of practice really getting it done? But I do believe conditioning does have its place because I think you develop mental toughness by doing some of those conditioning drills. So while we don't do a whole lot of conditioning, I still do it at times for that mental toughness piece. But honestly, I think our kids are mostly in shape from just not wasting time in practice,
Absolutely, Coach. I tell our guys all the time. I ask our kids when we're talking about being in football shape. I said, "How many? It's a 48-minute game. How much of that is spent actually playing football?" And the answers are all over the place. And I'm like, if it's two no huddle, really fast teams, there's 10 minutes of actual football played. If
Right.
it's two huddle teams, it's 8 minutes of actual football being played.
Right.
40 minutes of the game is in between plays, walking back to the huddle or
Yep.
doing this or doing that. But before we get into special teams, I want to make sure we get into that because I'm excited to hear from you on that. But I would be remiss if I didn't. Some of you may know Coach from I'm trying to remember what season of QB1 it was on Netflix. How was that? Like, I can't. Up in small town Prescott, Netflix is not coming to do our football practice, and I'm okay with that. But
Yeah.
how was that like? Because I was sitting there going, man, this would be tough.
It was. I tell you what, I don't regret it a bit. I've been asked, hey, do you wish you didn't do it? I said, no, I think it was such a unique experience for our kids, and I had to embrace. Like, I think for most football coaches, it's am I willing to embrace the distraction, the daily distraction of having players mic'd up, coaches mic'd up, cameras in your face, just the constant barrage of like stuff. And then you deal with the, at least I dealt with the anxiety of what are they actually going to put on this show? I won't incriminate myself, but I was very relieved. It was one game in particular where I was probably less than stellar with my language on the sidelines repeatedly. And I thought about it afterwards, and I'm like, ooh, that might end up on Netflix. That's not going to look, and for whatever reason, it wasn't Netflix worthy. So they omitted. There was no clips of that. And I was very grateful that didn't come out because I was a little concerned about that. But I for the most part, first of all, they were great. Like the group was very respectful. It got to the point where you really didn't even realize that you were, being, scrutinized and filmed or whatever. I got mic'd up every day. And probably my biggest joy of that whole experience was when my coaches or administrators or a fellow a teacher maybe would come in, pop in during pregame, because sometimes it was early in the day. I'm getting mic'd up, and they're coming over having what they would perceive to be a private conversation. So you think about like a show like The Office that kind of spoofs this. I'd let them kind of like go through it, and I'd remind them, go, hey, I'm mic'd up right now, just so you know. And they're like, oh no. And it was never anything terrible, but it's just it's one of those things I would have to do. Is like, you got to remember, after a while, most guys are like, hey, I got to be careful what I say around coach. He's probably got a microphone on him. But I got a kick out of that. Obviously, some of the drama that took place that season, the distraction of that, with it being on Netflix, was tough. And then ultimately, I think probably the biggest negative is, I think, the damage at that time that it did. Well, really not even when it first came out. I don't think it was that bad. But when Spencer was at Oklahoma, and basically the Sooner Nation turned on him when he got benched. And what happened? Somebody goes out and finds a clip of him getting into it with our backup quarterback, J.D. Johnson, and they take this stuff out of context. And there's a whole clip that was getting played over and over again where J.D.'s going, Spencer, why are you always so mean to me? And it just, the show didn't, always show Spencer in the greatest light. And Spencer is such a great young man. But he's still a kid, and these are all kids. And I think the one thing that, people lose sight of is, like, this is a 16, 17-year-old kid that we're and you see it, like, there's the ugly side of Twitter and other things where it's like, I saw it with Brian Lewerke, like where people they're just mean because, oh, I saw that show. I saw that kid's a jerk. And it's like, you have no idea who that kid is. You have no idea. And that should be a lesson for it. Definitely opened my eyes about any kind of reality show as far as how somebody can be portrayed. If you take certain context, you can make a lot of people look bad. They could have made me look a lot worse. I was fortunate that they didn't. So that's the only thing that I thought was, kind of a downer of doing that, is I think, it's out there forever, and somebody can always pull that back up. Spencer's done a great job of kind of, transcending that, maturing beyond that, and he's grown so much and as a collegiate player now, obviously being in the NFL. I know that stuff's behind him, and hopefully it served him for the scrutiny that he had to endure in college and, moving into his professional career. But I think that was probably the biggest negative. The rest of it, what for those kids, and even me, to be able to say, hey, I was on a Netflix show. Now that's kind of cool. Not everybody gets to say that. So, I don't regret it. Now, would I do it again? Probably not. It's kind of a once in a lifetime experience, and I don't regret it at all. But yeah, I don't think I would put the team and the program through that again.
Coach, I got to tell you, I thought, as a guy that's coached, I thought you guys all looked great on it. And as a guy I'm entering my 26th year coaching, 23rd year teaching, it looked like high school kids. That's
right.
Some of the interactions and banners. I was like, yeah, that's
right.
Sounds like our locker room. I mean,
yeah.
There was nothing out of the ordinary that I thought was anything like that at all. But and it was great viewing. It was really an entertaining show.
No, that production company, they were amazing, and the show that like the final product, like, and I thought they did a fantastic job, and I, for the most part, I think I don't feel like we were misrepresented. I don't think they misrepresent. I think they do a pretty good job of capturing, that school and kids, and in that regard. That's why I like none of the negativity. It's more just, once you put yourself out there as, you're a public figure now, if you're in the media, you're and it's like, as an adult, big deal, right? But when you're a 16, 17-year-old kid and you have to deal with, and it wasn't just, it wasn't just a Spencer. You look at some of those other quarterbacks that were on that show. There was the one from Bishop Gorman, I think from season 1, maybe. Boy, did he get painted.
One, they felt like they made him maybe not look in
Oof.
a good light. The Pinnacle
Yeah,
one,
that
you
was
thought it was like normal high school kids.
right,
The
right.
Bishop Gorman one, there was some stuff where I was like, they're I don't know.
Yeah, that was rough. And that's the stuff that's the risk, I think. And but the bottom line is the agreement had the two stakeholders, as I understood it, was Spencer and his family, and then me. And if either of us said no, it wouldn't have happened. So it takes you're inviting that. So it wasn't like I decided, hey Spencer, we're going to let this group. Invaded. The Rattler. The Rattler family are wonderful people, and they had to have their home invaded, and like I didn't have to worry about that. They didn't follow me around to my house or anything like they did with the Rattlers. So they had to agree to that, and then I had to agree, obviously, and and the school has to obviously sign off on it. But yeah, I think by and large it was it shined a good light. So many times there's things that shine a negative light, whether it's a movie that just like bleeds cliches when it comes to football and coaches, and we're all bullies, right? We're dummies and bullies. Certain movies have done that. So when you have an opportunity to say, hey, this is a true picture of high school football, and like you said, what did you see? You saw a bunch of high school kids that looked like my kids that I coach, and I saw a bunch of coaches, and it's such a, like, I don't know. I love the sport so much and what it teaches, and the grind of it, that I love that they've shown that on film. That's out there, right? Because I don't think that's out there as honest. And it's a pretty honest depiction, I think, of what high school football's like. You know.
Well, Coach, I want to make sure we already killed an hour here talking, and it's been wonderful. But I want to get into a little bit of special teams, how you go about practicing, how you separate your special teams, and biggest factor. There's some guys that want to get through special teams without it costing a game, but how do you use special teams to help you win some games? Because I think that's something you guys have been able to do. Have done a very good job in special teams. So talk to me a little bit about, if you have any video to share, anything like that. We'd love to see it, how you guys practice, and maybe, I know George Allen's famous for saying he thought punt was the most important play in football. What do you think are the most important special teams, and what are ways you can get an advantage in those areas?
Yeah, I think so. All great questions. I think for me, yeah, that is, I think it starts with recognizing uh, the importance of special teams, and I think every head coach understands that, but we run into this. I have a business background, so I'm going to use an economic term here, but opportunity costs. We only have so many hours in the day, and while we all recognize the importance, and it's the third phase of the game, and if you talk to different people, that you look at the metrics, on field position, the biggest metric to me is the exchange of field position, right? The exchange of space, and that's the one that I think that I'm probably most fixated on, is really truly understanding that value and importance of man. There's no single play on offense or defense that consistently involves an exchange of 30 to 40 yards of space and possession, right? And so that it kind of starts with understanding that importance. And then my years at Chaparral taught me that if we had a fantastic coach by the name of Chuck Motley, who was a kicking and punting coach primarily, but he was our special teams coach. But one of the problems is when you have a guy that's not, if he's not a very strong personality and he's not the head coach, I think it's really easy for both coaches and players to kind of dismiss the importance of it. It's like, oh, I got to go. Okay. There's a special teams guy barking for punt. Okay. And you get a little bit of, of, of kind of a mindset that this really isn't important. And then I hear stories, and these ones are the ones that blow me away. It's like, even at 6A, where you hear, oh yeah, they just put in there, or I've heard this from at least one coach. Yeah, we just week before game one, I think it was Thursday before game one, we put in our extra point. And I'm like, what? Like that's just mind boggling to me that and that tells me for you, special teams is an afterthought. It's we got to line up, kickoff return, all these things, but we just kind of got to get through those and hope we don't mess up the game. And I think you're missing a great opportunity to have an influence on the game by doing that. Now that being said, um, I still we still deal with that same culture where it's like, man, we have so much to put in on the offensive side and defensive side. How do we whittle in, all the special teams plays and make sure that we're doing it service? So a few advantages that I have since I have football classes. I can hold meetings. I'm the one coach. My coordinators aren't in there with me, so special teams time for me, I can get through. I can set up drills. So on a typical weekly practice, if we're running whatever specials we're running that day, we get meeting time during the school day. So even if it's a lift day, I'll take 10 minutes and I'll say, hey, we're going to do this drill. We're going to run this. And so at least our kids are somewhat mentally prepared for going out to practice that day, and they know what special team we're covering, what situation we're going to run, what drill, if any, we're gonna do with that, right? And so I think that's one way I get an advantage. I can also use during that class time. I'll walk through things. I can literally take my kids out on the field, and I can line them up and walk through something, like if I'm going to add a formation or something like that. But so that's one thing. But I'm the special teams coordinator, and not because I necessarily need to be, but I think if you don't have a coach that is dynamic and extremely passionate about special teams, I think the head coach should be the special teams coordinator, because of what I said earlier is you need that guy that is passionate about those plays, but he also has to have the influence over the players. And that's where, we hold the trump card as head coaches typically, right?
When you
Kids
do
got
it,
it.
it
They got to
tells
pay
them that
attention.
this is not a screw around session. When
Right, right.
Coach something's in special teams, they know, hey,
Yeah.
the
So
big
so I think
so.
that gets our kids dialed in a little bit more than others. And I'll be honest, we have room to grow. I haven't done the best job of really delegating positions on the field. So I've been a bit of a one. Like, I have somebody that always runs our scout. I have guys that work with our returners and our kickers. But when it comes to scheme, it's pretty much me and the kids. I line them up and we roll. But I've usually, it's because I've done this groundwork during the day. So if I got our punt team out there, and that's our most dynamic uh, special teams, I think, is our punt team. I try to do, but it gets back to what you talk about. Is like I look for ways to get an advantage, and so I'm going to give them credit. We put in the rugby punt when Mike Brown was around, but it was actually I had a freshman coach by the name of Craig Juntonen, and Craig's son was playing for us at the time, and I don't know why he called it this, but he called it Rugrat, and we still call it to this day. And it's just our rugby look, and it really changed my lens of looking at the punt as a play. And if you start looking at punt as not, oh man, we're fourth down and we gotta exchange some field position here, instead of looking at it's like, and we're still on offense. If you just change your mindset and just say, hey, this is still an offensive play. We haven't conceded possession yet. So that's just changed so that was one big thought or big idea on punt, is like, we're not just conceding, we're giving this ball back. And then the second one was, if you and there's nothing wrong with this. We run like traditional spread punt and we run shield. So I've kind of evolved into this being multiple as a punt, scrimmage kick team. And it just depends on the situation. But I also I think about that other coach. This has been a big thing for me is I'm going to make you practice longer on specials than maybe you want to because we have at least three different distinctly different alignments on punt that you have to address. We run swing and gate, and we have at least two alignments on swing and gate that you have to address. If you don't, it's going to cost you. And so I'm either taking you away from, and it gets back to the opportunity cost. I'm taking you away from your offensive and defensive time, or because let's face it, your defensive coach is the one that's probably stuck scheming. How are we gonna line up to that? How are we gonna defend that? And guess what? They're not thinking about. They're not thinking about blocking kicks or returning kicks. They're thinking about I just want the ball back. So to me, it's a very aggressive approach that when you play Pinnacle High School and you're dealing with us in a punt formation or a punt situation, you have to be thinking about, okay, these guys aren't just going to kick it away and we get the ball. You're not breathing easy. At the end of the day, I don't want you breathing easy on fourth down thinking, oh, we're getting this ball back for sure, right? Or, hey, we're going to get after this one because I may fake it. We always go into a game with at least three fakes that you haven't seen. And that's something I learned from Mike Brown. That was kind of like he went into every game with at least three gadget plays on offense. So I've taken that approach with punt. Is I'm going to go into every game with three fakes that you haven't seen. We practice them all year, and then I decide week to week what we're going to throw in, and then I run it week one. Well, that'll come back around and play in week 4, week 5, right? So I'm always looking to have those things in. And then our rugby is always an option. Like we always have an option. And I always have a guy back there that can throw the football. A lot of times it's our quarterback. And it was really powerful with Wyatt the last few years. And before him, Spencer. Spencer was really the first one that we did this with. And it's like when you see Spencer Rattler line it up in punt formation, the last thing any defensive coach is going is, man, we're going to get a big return here. They're going, man, we need to defend this kid. And that becomes the focus is defending him. So we end up getting great exchanges. So if you're not going to get, if you do a good job defending the fakes and the options, that's great because you're not returning this ball. And then, some teams wouldn't even put a returner back because they're going to add that guy to help in the coverage. And that ball just back there rolling, right? And I've had some punt, like I think Spencer was over 40-yard average, not because they're great punters. Wyatt was, I think his best year is like a 42-yard punt average. It's because most of the time that ball's just bouncing back there. Nobody's back there to catch it. And that's one of those advantages. And the rugby punt in particular is really good because you can manipulate that. If a team is really focused on defending your receivers, you're biding time for your cover team. So we do have a way to, like, hey, it looks like punt pass option. It looks like option punt, but I can release everybody. Take advantage of the rule, and where we know we're not going to throw the ball. And now I've got everybody down the field, but you don't know what I'm doing. So you can't teach your guy on number 3 who's trying to man number 3. Hey, if you see the lineman release, go down and set up the return, right? So I think that's some of the things, being aggressive and not conceding, the ball on fourth down has been really big for us. I think last year against Liberty, we came out first drive. They went down and scored right away. It's Liberty, man. They're boom. That's a lot of moment. We're at their house. They go down and score right away. We're risking going 3 and out. We were lucky. We were fortunate to have the ball I don't think we went 3 and out. I think we got 1 or 2 first downs. We were close to midfield, and it was fourth down and 7, 8 at midfield. I'm like, I'm gonna take a chance here because this is gonna be a big momentum play, and we caught him. We caught him and it was just a fake. It wasn't a rugby punt, but it was game changing. We scored on that. We scored on that play, and it lit up it was what it did for us, right? It lit up our sidelines. Our sidelines now is like, wait, okay, we're in this. Because man, Liberty jumps on you early, like you're in for a long night, and we've been there. So to me, that put us in a position where, man, we had some momentum. We got a score. We answered. And then our offense kind of came to life, and we were trading scores with them for a good part of the game. So that was another example where being aggressive on special teams really paid off, I think.
Coach, walk me through your rugby punt a little bit because I've always struggled to how to protect it, the rules. We've done a spread punt, not the shield punt, excuse me. It's
Right.
been really successful for us in the last couple of years. We've kind of been in and out. But walk me through your rugby punt because I always love it, but I'm not sure I have all the details of how to teach it in terms of the protection and all those things.
Sure. So again, and this gets into some of the challenges is we're still dealing with typical cover guys, so they're not pass blockers per se. So we spend a fair amount of time working the protection, but we keep the protection fairly simple. We zone protect it, and it's basically like outside zone up front. So for our front five, they're blocking heavy outside zone, and because we feel like we're going to run away from any backside pressure for the most part. Now I have some
You got two
answers.
bullets, two like wide guys, and then five.
So yeah, we always have two bullets, but it's almost exclusively 3x1 that we'll run it from. So we'll run, and that's where it's a challenge is and this is why we don't exclusively rugby punt anymore, because if the ball's on the right hash, and you when you rugby into the boundary, you're running into a lot of problems. You can do it, but you run into a lot of problems. There's a lot, the field is compressed, so your punter has less room to operate. When he does kick the ball, it's more likely you're going to shank one out of bounds. So there's a lot of bad stuff that can happen because it's hard if your kickers, unless you got a kid that's like just a freak of nature, it was ambidextrous and can kick left-footed, that would be a game changer. If you got a kid that can kick as well with his left as his right, then I might go back and be a exclusive rugby guy. But we get on the right hash. It's tough to run. I've done it, but it's tough to run rugby. So that's one limiting factor because I'm going to use the space to run away from any backside pressure. So we're 3x on the front side, but I also have personal protector. And so our personal protector is looking for that first edge defender outside, just like we would teach outside zone. He's looking for the first threat outside, a 5 technique on the line of scrimmage. And so some ways that teams will scheme it, and we have answers for this, but they're gonna bring it. Brock out at Highland was really good at. They would show a spur, some kind of overhang over maybe our number 2 guy, and they're going to send him, right? They're going to send him from space, and that will absolutely pull our guy up. But like I said, we have things that we'll do to answer that, and you're also running the risk. You better have a guy on top of him. So, I look at pre-snap indicators, pre-snap alignment, and how teams are going to align to rugby to decide what, and I wait to see it before I call. I control it, so I can tell our guy, man, he can catch him. We'll run it like spread punt. If a team looks like they're going to pressure the rugby and they're just going to come all out, I may just tell them to catch and kick, and we'll get it off, right?
Do you
And
do
then
that from
and
the
then
sideline before he's waiting to kick?
yeah,
Give
yes,
him some signal.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I'll we have different signals that I'll give based on the alignments over there. But we work those scenarios in practice too. Is like, okay, if they're +1 on that side. So if I see 3/3, right? Let's say there's just 3/3 on the 3x side. If one of those guys comes, I got a hot route. I got somebody who's open. We're going to throw the ball. Like, go ahead, bring that guy from number 2. My kid's going to go hot, and I'm going to dump that ball over your head. And so just like you do on pass offense, right? if I see somebody like a overhang that's looking like he's coming in, I'll see it. I'll see the returner, or I'll see another defender creeping over. They have to, right? So they're going to give you. You can't do this in a vacuum. So you're going to give it away. You're going to give something away. So if I see that guy creeping over, and I teach my punter that, who's typically a quarterback, hey, is that guy creeping over or not? You're going to get pressure right now, and we may have a hot situation, but he knows, man, if that guy's capped, hey, I'm gonna kick right away, and those guys won't get there. Like, that's the thing you got to remember. My kid's still 12 yards. I think typically we're 10 to 12 yards deep. He's still got quite a bit of space. If he catches that ball and one steps it, he's still going to get it off. So it starts with, the different, but I'm going to tell you, most teams aren't scheming us. Like, and I run the risk when I share this stuff. It's like, if all of our opponents are watching this year, it's like, okay, everybody's going to scheme our rugby punt. Well, that's fine, because I got 15 other punts we're going to use. But most teams, they're going to watch your film. They got 1 week to prepare for you, right? So they're going to watch your film, and they've got to, how much time are they? It gets back to our original talk. How much time are they spending on special teams? Now, there are those exceptional coaches that are see that value or respect it enough. They're like, man, we got to be dialed in against this, right? And like I said, Brock Farrell is one of those guys who's always done a really good job. Some other things we'll do is I'll line up and show rugby and see what I'm going to get, and we'll shift out of it and punt spread or punt shield. And so that's the other part when you start looking at it as, okay, we're all playing a chess game, right? I mean, there's a chess game going on between your offensive defense coordinator and your the defensive guys, trying, like, we're all making educated guesses based on what we're seeing. So why is punt any different, right? I'm going to look and see how are you trying to defend us? How are you trying to scheme us? And you're going to give me something as to how you're going to play that. And it's really up to me or us to have an answer for whatever you're showing, right? So if a team wants to overload the rugby side, I might have a fake going back to the weak side. Like, I've seen teams that have been really unsound, and if you're going to be unsound, you're risking, do I have an answer? And I'm going to bet that most guys are going to look, it's like, yeah, we could do that, but what if he does? What if he runs a tackle eligible or something on the weak side, which I may do. So it's just, a lot of this comes from being a longtime defensive coordinator against some really creative guys. Mike Brown being one of them. Mike at Greenway, we were really aggressive at Chaparral and punt, and I ran punt block at Chaparral, and we were really aggressive, but it was highly unsound. I think on a 4th and 15 on his own 15-yard line, he ran a fake punt and scored. And I mean, you got to have. But I talked to him. Mike worked for me, and I talked to him about that. I said, I saw what you guys were doing, and I knew you were going to bring everybody off that side, and we didn't have enough guys to defend. They basically just got 2 over 1, and it was an easy read for the punter to just dump it to their personal protector, and away he went. So that's some of the thoughts I've always had. It's like, what did that do to me? That made me very conservative playing Mike Brown. If I'm playing against Mike Brown and when he's lining up for punt, I want to make sure we're getting the ball back. And so I'm kind of playing into that same philosophy, right? Is that I'm banking on, as if you've got film on us, you see us, we probably have a fake, and not every game, but probably every other game, we're gonna have a fake punt or a rugby punt, something that extends our drive. And if you dismiss that, it's going to cost you, and if you respect it, then I feel like I'm getting an advantage where we're going to get a good exchange. So I guess that's the win-win for me. And getting back into rugby, again, there's always issues. I'll run on balance sometimes, just bring an extra defender or an extra blocker on that side. We'll try to run. I've run it from empty before, just to give things that are very simple for us to do. it doesn't take much to take your personal protector from, 6 yards back over a guard or over a tackle and move them up to a wing. But now you're dealing with quads over there, and any defensive coach will go, okay, that gets you, usually gets guys structure like, I got a fourth vertical threat now, right? Now I may just be using that guy to block, or maybe he's a route guy, and I'm going to use the number 3 receiver to pin to come back and pin, right? And these are all things that I think are pretty simple for us to do, but cause a lot of stress for our opponents, right?
Absolutely.
So I think I don't know if that it's specific on and then the only thing is personnel. I think we're obviously going to have those 3 guys we have in there. I put good offensive players on punt. Like a lot of guys are going to focus. Our front guys are going to be linebacker, safety type, good fast cover guys. But our spread guys are all receivers, and my personal protector is like last year was one of our most dynamic players. Hybrid slot running back, can do a lot of different things. Physical kid. And we missed if we were actually in Rugrat and against Queen Creek, it would have been a huge play. And unfortunately, White just overthrew him. But we had a throwback screen off our rugby because they were overplaying the rugby. They were being aggressive. They were smart. You're in week 12. They've seen a lot of film. They've seen that formation. They took some time. Playoff football guys are working a little harder, I think. So we had that in our pocket, and I saw it. Man, they were really aggressive off the backside. They weren't leaving anybody back. They were just trying to get pressure on the kick, but they were coming hard off the backside. And I had a screen back to that side with my personal protector where he floated out, and he was so open. Like he walks into the end zone. And unfortunately, my quarterback punter just overthrew it. And that's a risky take. And that's the other thing I think you have to do is you have to be willing to take risks. And my guys will laugh at me because I'll usually say something anytime I fake. I said, "All right, guys, I'm either gonna put us in a really bad position here, or this is gonna be really, really great." And just so everybody's aware, they're not coming off the field going, "What the heck just happened?" So yeah, it's trying to be educated with it, but also having, I guess, the courage to trust your kids to make plays, and we got to take chances sometimes, and I think special teams is no different in that regard, where we can take some opportunities.
Well, Coach, last question because we've gotten some great information, but we've been talking for quite a while now. But last question, and I'd be remiss. I'm assuming you have different personnel for your shield punt and fake wise. I've struggled finding a decent fake in shield punt. Is that obviously you have one? I know, but what that one
Yeah,
to me been? Do you not have the 3 big boys for your shield, or how are you going about doing
yeah.
it? I'm
So
assuming
that's a great question. So what we did last year, and last year was the first year we did it, and I love doing this. I'm blessed. Like this is honestly, Coach, we're having a bigger squad and being a little more dynamic. So I had 2 tight ends that are really, and I have it again this year, that are really good athletes. So on my shield, and then my personal protector, while he's not as big, is very physical. And so basically what I do is I don't look at the college model and go, okay, I got to have 3 big boys back there. And that's what I've always hated about shield is, man, I feel like I'm losing 3 cover guys. I totally get the premise, and shield still, it's part of what we do too. But I wanted to be multiple without switch. So to answer your first question, I do not change personnel. My shield punt, my spread punt, and my rugby are all the same kids, and that does present challenges. But I also know I'm on to something because it's like offensive football. If there was years ago we were playing Conrad. No, we were playing Mountain Point in the playoffs when Norris Vaughn was there, and we were a heavy 10 and 11 personnel team. But when we got in or really 10, 20, and 11 personnel. But when we get into 11, They knew we were run, play, action, and they changed personnel to match, and we were very ineffective. They were able to play that matchup game. Mike Brown, when Mike was my offensive coordinator, Mike was really big on, hey, we're going to run with the same personnel. So sometimes Mike had formations where our X, who was a true X, had to line up in the tight end spot. That's just the way it was. And it really opened my eyes. This is still high school football. Even 6A, it's high school football. I don't have to have the prototypical guy in certain spots to be effective. So what I've looked for is that balance. Okay, we had a kid by the name of Blake Dinelli last year, and Tyson Muniz, who are my wings on spread punt. Well, they're both tight ends. Both kids are 6'3", 6'4", and over 200 pounds. Well, they become my two outside guys on the shield, and then my personal protector he's about a 180-pound kid, so I'm giving up some weight there, but he's tough as nails. And when we run shield and people attack it, we didn't have any issues with them getting blown back. We were just firm and using the same shield principles. And I don't run shield enough to where I don't think you're going to spend all week, repping your block scheme against shield. So that's the other thing. Is like we don't major in shield. So you may see it, you may not. But to your point, the other one that I struggled with was, the fake game out of shield. So we've got a couple. One is basically a personal protector sweep that we can run just because I got a really dynamic kid back there. If I put the ball in his hands, he's got a chance. I think the one that, and I'll be honest, I haven't run this. We also have a screen off of it that I think is probably the best fake on shield. So what are teams mostly going to do to attack you on shield punt? They're gonna load the A and B gaps, and they're gonna try to blow your shield up. That's what I do. And if you catch a team that's super, like, do you have any of your kids, if you're playing a shield punt team, say, hey, let's make sure as we're blowing up the shield, let's make sure that we're all green dogging them or spying them or whatever, right?
No.
So no, you're just going after them, man. You're telling your guy, man, go blow those guys up.
They're coming forward.
So you leak out any one of those shield guys for a middle screen and bring your guards and tackles, because I don't know what your spacing is. I think we go. I think we're 3 yards then 5 yards. We're pretty wide.
Yeah,
we're a true spread shield.
Yeah.
So we'll go 3 and 5, but if we let those guys through and converge, I get a 5-man middle screen and just dump that. All we got to do. We never ran it last year, except in practice. But I'm confident that it'll work, and that's a risk that you take if you're going to bring, because I'm always looking for that thing. I know how you're going to attack me, so I have to have an answer to respond to that aggression, right? So you're going to overplay the middle, and if you don't have a couple guys back there just spying my shield, and I can dump that off. Even if you do, if you put 2 backers back there and you bring it heavy, I got 5 dudes coming at you. I got 5 on 2. I like those odds, right? So that's one. I think the other one that you can play around with on shield, and this is a little more sneaky, is if you go to a 2-man shield and just insert that guy somewhere else. Another kind of kooky idea, and I got this from Farrell, just watching them, and they've done this to us at Highland, is unbalanced shield. Brock, man, I love it, man. He does some amazing things, but he'll run basically his tackle and end over. So it's one surface and then your center, and then he'll offset the shield away from that. So he'll be tighter, but then he's got some screens off of that, right? And then the other thing, you start getting into, you could actually, I actually had it. I never had the guts to run it, but we had it in where we ran like an obnoxious unbalanced shield. And I had a kid by the name of Owen Pimbert, who was our middle linebacker, just a stud. And we had a center eligible off of that, because who's gonna cover the center? I don't care. Who's thinking about covering a center on a punt? And then there's nothing to say if you go 2-man shield and I was in that unbalance, all I'd have to do is step off the it's basically taking advantage, like kind of tapping into A11. You remember when the A11 offense
Do.
that was one of the little gimmicky things that they would do. And the reason why it got outlawed is because it's too easy you got all eligible numbers on the field.
Yeah.
So it's too easy to create an eligible receiver out there. So now, hey, did I take my guard and step him back? So you're in a 2-man shield and you step your guard back. Do they realize it? Does the defense realize that? And now you leak him out on a screen. Did somebody go with him? So that's where my mind goes with shield.
You might not realize it. The 16-year-old kid on the field definitely probably does.
Definitely. So yeah, those are some of my fake game thoughts for shield punt. Shield does present some challenges in that regard. I mean, you're basically conceding like, hey, we're just trying to get a big exchange here. I got a great snapper, and we're going to get down the field, and we're going to virtually guarantee no return, right? But I think if you open your mind a little bit, you can find that out. Some different ways to attack it. But like I said, the quickie huddle was an ad from last year, or last year was the first year we did it, and I coupled that with being multiple. So I'm trying. There's like something like Harbaugh would do this at Michigan on offense all the time. He'd line up. They would do like like the centipede alignment, right? They would show literally all 11 in a single line and then just burst out. And some guys go, "Oh, that's bush league or that's gimmicky." And it's like, yeah, but it's illegal, and you got to defend it. Yeah, and you got to prepare for whatever I'm going to do. So now I get my kids in a quickie huddle. And we might be rugby, we might be shield, we might be spread, and you got to deal with all of it. And more importantly, you might practice it all week. Like you said, the coach might even understand it. But how quick is your kid on the field recognizing our set and aligning to it, right? And that's the other, big idea, I think, on that.
Well, Coach, I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed the last 90 minutes. It flew by, and the special team stuff was gold. All the practice planning and everything we discussed. I am really, really appreciative of you being on the show, and I wish the Pioneers all the luck in the world in this 2025 season. And we will definitely be calling you again. Probably we're going to, just so you know, this is I believe episode 2, this is going to get released for season 2 here. Most of our in-season episodes are going to be me babbling on about some topic because it's going to be tough to get guests during the in-season because everybody's so busy.
Right.
But super appreciative of you joining us, and we'll definitely be calling you the off-season to maybe get you on another episode, and I'd love to talk to your O&D coordinator sometime as well. But thank you, everybody, again for joining us. Remember, please like and subscribe. We'll see you next time for another edition of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show. Thank you.